So let me introduce again our panelists, and also to remind people that we're live streaming this event, so there are people joining us on the internet. And just like we did yesterday, if there's a question, please, those of you on the internet, please mark your question as such, as a query that you want to for the panelists to answer. And for those of us in the room here, if you have a question, you need to raise your hand, speak up, ask the question. It's going to be kind of a free-flowing conversation here today. And I will have to repeat it so that the people on the internet can hear it, okay? So those are kind of the ground rules. But please don't wait. If you have a question, that's the right time to raise it. Okay, so our panelists. We have Chris Jones from Carnegie Mellon. And Chris, as you now know, was one of the developers for this introductory French course through what's called OLI, Open Learning Initiative, which has been going on for many years. Carnegie Mellon's a big player in open education. Next to him is Fernando Rubio, who is a Spanish professor from the University of Utah and has developed a hybrid course in Spanish. Next to him is Daniel Herron from the University of Texas at Austin, right here at UT Austin. And Daniel he has a heavy job, he has a heavy load. He's representing an entire demographic, and that is digital natives or the younger generation or actually students, because we have these professor types. We needed to get a student type, and he's going to be talking again from his viewpoint about collaborative teams between professors and students and so forth. Next to him is Jonathan Perkins, who's director of the Language Center at the University of Kansas. Background in Russian and in instructional technology. And his colleague, Amy Rosamundo, who also from the University of Kansas, Spanish professor and co-developer of Acceso, an intermediate online course, an open course for Spanish. Okay, so that's our panelists. And so that's entitled, the focus today is, for our panel discussion, is creating, sharing, and collaborating. So those are all, we're talking about how to create a social environment that promotes all of those activities. And first of all, I guess I want to start off by having each of the panelists just talk a little bit about what they find tell their story of collaboration. Okay, so down at the end of the table, Amy and of course Jonathan have collaborated, but they have other people who aren't present because each one of these people represent a team of people collaborating. So what is collaborative about Acceso? I mean, it's collaborative on many levels, but could you just give me a summary about how it was collaborative?
Well, we've had more than, I think, between 50 and 60 people work on Acceso. So it's a big collaboration between the graduate students and the Academic Resource Center and myself. And also it's somewhat interdisciplinary because the graduate students went to graduate students in film and media studies to learn how to shoot an interview in a professional way. We've had undergraduate art students work on the logo and the design. So it's actually turned into quite an interdisciplinary collaboration. And I knew nothing about technology when I started, so obviously Jonathan had a lot to do with the collaboration.
Yeah, I'd add to that. I think a lot of what we're trying to do is to pull in other people, to pull in, as she said, undergraduates. I have a staff of undergraduates who work for us who have talents in lots of different areas. We had a videographer who's very good at doing video, who shot interviews with them, who edited videos. As she said, we had a graphic designer who works for us. We have a very talented web designer who unfortunately was not able to join us today, Kia Cunningham, who started with us as an undergrad. And because she was so talented, we realized we had to keep her on. So again, that's sort of as the project evolved, I think our goal is to, in some sense, build undergraduates up so that they can become professionals. So it's sort of training at the same time as we're creating the materials.
Pass it on down. So I want to just, I'm going to interrupt. That's my prerogative. Uh, um, we have a very heterogeneous group here. And so yesterday, George made a comment and said, well, I don't have a team of 40 graduate students, right? And so many of you don't have a team of 40 graduate students. And the point is people are talking from their position, from their very specific background. So the general frame is collaboration. People have different stories within that general frame. So try to take from them some basic concepts that can apply to you. So I would like to point out, I mean, that notion of interdisciplinarity or trying to work with not only foreign language instructors, if you're thinking about where can I start, maybe you can start with somebody else in your school who is maybe collaborative by nature. It doesn't always have to be within like the people that you might think are your natural collaborators. Okay, so pass it on, Daniel.
Okay, well, I think from what John was saying, how getting a lot of undergraduates to work with you from all different majors is a really great idea to incorporate and create something unique as well. I mean, it's great for you all because it's a lot of free work as well, and relatively free, right? But also on the same hand, as a student, it's pretty cool because it gives us real-time application of our skills, and so if you can help us out with resumes and stuff like our cover letters and all that kind of stuff as well. It's really good. So I've had the privilege of working with Orlando Kelm. Sadly, he could not be here today. He's very well known of collaborating with his students. That's kind of how I got here at UT was I just found his Tafalado online, and I said, this is awesome. I want to go to school here. And I didn't know that I was actually going to end up meeting him and going to Brazil. And
Tafalado, by the way, just could you tell the audience what it is?
Yeah, Tafalado is one of the first trilingual online podcasts. So it's in Spanish, Portuguese, and English. And it's an audio podcast, and won all these awards, and it's what made Orlando famous. And all the other stuff he did wasn't that important. But no, I'm just no, but so yeah, it creates its own little community. I think that's one of the later questions we're going to talk about it more then. So yeah, I've worked with him on that, and he's just been really good on incorporating students into everything he does. Oh, I'm sorry, I need to talk a little closer. Thanks. Incorporating how students in everything he does, whether it be editing, code editing, or design, or lucky for me, I get to do the social media, the fun stuff. So, well, it's not always that fun. So yeah, that's how we collaborate.
Yeah, I want to add too just a note about Tafalado. One of the cool things about it is so many people who take Portuguese already know some Spanish. In fact, most of the students here at UT come from Spanish into Portuguese. He developed the site based on that kind of notion. So it's a real nice comparison between the two languages, and then of course with English. Fernando.
So our course started with an idea that I had a few years ago, and then it evolved over a year through conversations with a group of graduate students and instructors that worked with me on the design of the course. And during that year, we were gathering materials and working on the design and learning a lot from one another. I had a group of somewhat heterogeneous group of students whose interests, some of them had no idea how to work with technology, some had no interest in language methodology, and everyone ended up learning a lot from everyone else in the group. And we worked on the design of the course for a year, and then we continued to meet regularly the first 2 years of the implementation of the course. And one of the interesting side effects of the course is that this was a hybrid course, but we maintained a traditional version of the course that we teach as well in parallel to the hybrid course. And some of the people who were participating in the hybrid project were also teaching the traditional project. And during the discussions that happened, particularly the first year that we taught the hybrid, everyone agreed that everything that went on during the design and the implementation of the hybrid had a huge effect on how they taught in the traditional course. So it had really changed the way they taught even a traditional course by being involved in the hybrid project. So it was a good learning experience for everyone.
And Chris.
I'm sort of known for this French Online project. It might be useful to just do a quick rundown. Since I'm sort of the senior citizen here, I've developed hypercard programs, CD-ROMs, video discs, audio CDs, digital media of all kinds, and web-based courseware, working in teams from 1 to 50. And this French Online is kind of the culmination of that trajectory. I've worked without any support whatsoever, with institutional or departmental support. I've worked for a commercial publisher. I've worked with, I've spent more than $1 million in grant funding. It's not that one context is necessarily more desirable than another. In fact, the French Online project which is the most collaborative, and it's the largest project and involves a huge technical team over which I have very little control. In the Open Learning Initiative, which is sort of a meta project, it's not always as easy as something for which you have defined the parameters and it's small and you can do it and finish it and so forth. But the French Online project really started with another colleague in French designing, writing videos, and grew out from scripted videos, which we shot in France and in Quebec, into this very large design. We were already involved with the Open Learning Initiative group and had constraints from that point of view, but the reason that it is an open educational resource, the French Online, is because that was a condition of the funding from the Hewlett Foundation, which was the major funder of the Open Learning Initiative at the time. I'm very happy that that worked out that way, and to a certain extent it sort of introduced me to the benefits of having an open stance, and we've gotten continuous feedback from OER type users.
So, any questions from the audience, by the way, before I move on? Okay, so I want to ask, so that kind of established people's stories, who they are, where they're coming from. Collaboration isn't easy. It's great when it works. It's terrible when it doesn't work. It's kind of like teaching, right? So I want you to talk a little bit about, was your collaboration a success? Was it always a success? What were the hurdles that you had to overcome to make it work in each of your situations? Okay. You got the mic. No, we can go any direction. Yeah, Chris, you got the mic. It's yours. Your turn.
Okay, so relating to, I guess, just French Online, then we'll do one project, right? Okay, so French Online, I was just talking about that. French Online with significant grant funding meant that you can pay people to do things. Paying people to do things generates a sort of dependence on actual funding, which many of us in our professional lives, in other words, things that you do to enhance your teaching, are often unfunded other than by your personal time, right? Once you pay faculty to do something, the next time you ask them to do something, they expect to be paid. And same thing with graduate students and undergrads. They're by and large going to want to be compensated for their work, and there's justice in that. But faculty are not intrinsically used to doing work for hire. So there are other priorities that come along. They have a paper to finish, and so producing something which is really textbook-like in our case may not be first on their list. And there were some contradictions there. But so French Online has been primarily a funded project, and now is generating enough cash flow so that I can continue to pay stipends to faculty and graduate students over the summer to improve it. Now that's kind of a unique situation, because mostly what happens is the funding goes away, and then all the collaborators have moved on, and they're now doing that paper exclusively rather than going back and tweaking the OER materials.
That's a big, that's a huge, you've opened up a can of worms. It's a good one too. Talk about what funding. Again, I'm thinking people here are thinking, "Oh, I don't have $1 million from the Hewlett Foundation, so I need to do whatever I do, I need to do it on the cheap." But the vision that we were talking about yesterday of open education is kind of generous and altruistic and often largely unfunded. So, but that's a really great question. When should you ask people to contribute without any kind of monetary gain? Because that can be also, there are other benefits. So it's like, what is the reward system for people contributing to education, contributing to these nonprofit organizations? So yeah, keep on going.
So in our case, we didn't have a lot of funding, really. I was able to get a couple of small internal grants from the university that I used to give a monetary incentive to the graduate students to work on the project. I was lucky enough to have graduate students working with me, and they generally tend to get more excited about these things than faculty. And they were excited to work on it even without the money, because the money ran out after a semester or two. But I think they saw other incentives. And the other incentives that they saw, well, they were excited about it. They were excited about doing something that back then was new. They were excited about the fact that we all shared the authorship of what we were doing, right? And that they had the opportunity to go around the country, and I've done this for several years with graduate students that participated in this project, and talk about it and even publish about it. And that was their incentive, their motivation to do this. They believed in it. They thought that it was good for the students. They thought that it was good for themselves, for their own learning, and they saw that it had professional benefits for them too.
So that goes back again, I'm trying to relate these threads here to the Creative Commons license. The starting point is attribution. So for educational endeavors, attribution is really important. And the students should be front and center in that. Okay. Before Daniel, Marti, you had a question, or is it? Okay, so we have a question from the audience about a remark that Chris made. He said that they're now getting money from users, or it was not funded originally, but now they're getting some kind of money stream.
So I'll just give you how it works for us, and this is really up to the individual course projects within the Open Learning Initiative. There must be an open and free version, but we from the beginning designed it for instructor-led enrolled students, which is a paid use and involves using a grade book and tracking tools for the instructors. Now that costs, and there are various licensing options. The simplest one is you just set up your own course and invite your students to enroll, and they pay with a credit card. And for higher ed, it's $50 a student. So there are enough.
That's actually quite cheap.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the cost of textbooks and so forth, it's reasonably competitive, and it has its advantages as a course, and our course is competitive with commercial textbooks. So that, and there's sliding scales for secondary schools and homeschoolers and three-year institutions. So it's actually a formalized system of compensation. It is not donation driven at all.
Good.
Okay, so if I recall, the original question was a success and failure with collaborating in open resources?
Yeah, how was collaboration? How did it go from your end?
Okay. Well, I'm a student, so I can just tell you what I've learned in my Portuguese classes, and so I'll give you a success first and then a failure. So the success was creating movies. Movies are an amazing way to have students learn a language, because you are putting the responsibility on them to come up with a script, write the dialogue, get it all proper, and then memorize it, right? So, I mean, it's touching on that pamphlet that you hand out, the reading, the writing, all the other ones, right? So making movies, that's something that Orlando does in his class, and I think that was one of the most successful things because it also creates some interaction between students as well. So they're helping each other to learn and really learn these languages because they're going to be on camera, and then he's going to put them up on YouTube and share them out. So, you know, they don't want to be embarrassed. So that's how I would say is a really good collaboration, and that's free essentially. I mean, okay, you got to get a camera and stuff, but a lot of times, you know, people just make them on your iPhone or something like that, or a flip camera. So I think that's a great way that you can, a free pretty much resource that you can use to collaborate and learn a language.
So let me just clarify.
Sure.
You're saying that he actually uses the students in his class to produce materials,
Correct.
right? And then he puts it up online.
Right.
We were talking the other day about FERPA and all these guidelines, and when should that what's the difference between a private class and then making that go public? Did that bother you that your work was then being essentially your class work was being viewed publicly?
No, because I think he's not going out there and tweeting it out like every hour. Say, hey, check out my student. No, he's just really putting it up there to make it fun for us because, you know, we share it with our friends and our family and those kinds of things. He's not publicly going out and advertising it. I think he's just kind of showing the world that, hey, this is a really great way to learn a language. He did make us sign contracts and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, that was where I was going with it. So yeah, there are legal issues
right.
about that, right?
That's just logistics, you know.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah, right. So you had to sign something that gave him the rights to post it. Yeah.
Correct. You have to do those things. But
right.
Everybody was just completely, you know, let's do it. This is going to be fun. I think by adding that entertainment fun aspect to
right.
it, that's the only way that you can really engage these students.
Right. Let me ask you then also. So once it was posted, once your films, movies, whatever were posted, did you get responses from the public? Do you know about that? We were talking the other day about outreach and inreach. Did you have inreach from the community?
Inreach from the
Portuguese
web community?
speaking from the Brazilians,
I mean, a lot of times a lot of students would post it on their own Facebook, and so they got to see how their friends reacted and gave comments on it. I'm not sure if we saw too much like commenting and stuff like that on the actual like YouTube page and stuff. I don't recall if Orlando made it private so no one can leave comments. It's just up there to kind of view like a Tumblr kind of thing where you just put it up there. So as I would say, more importantly for an inward though would be the motivation that it builds in the culture it builds within the classroom. So, I mean, we're all kind of like in there individually learning the language, but by being, I guess, forced to make these videos, we've really become really good friends outside of the classroom as well as inside. So that's what, to me, is more inward than like the people on the interwebs making random comments.
The interwebs.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that was good.
That was a good one. So let me give you an example of a bad one. So you can't utilize these technologies and force your students to do them. They have to be willing to participate. And, you know, for example, the big thing right now is social media. You can't force people to use social media. They have to choose to use it. I mean, everyone pretty much uses it anyways, but you can't force them to use it. So I've been pushing Orlando to do social media because he's got great content. Now we just got to, you know, deliver it in a certain way that's more interactive and fun. But you know, not everybody. A lot of students, it's like one of those college things. It's a midlife college crisis where it's like, do I use Facebook? Do I not use Facebook? So seriously, like there's people who are rebellions. You know, they say, I'm not going to use Facebook. I'm not going to buy into it. You know, and so you have to think of it as a supplement. In addition, you can't go in there and say, hey, this class is going to use Facebook. You know, you have to use it as a supplement. And example with WordPress. We went on a study abroad trip and we said, okay, students, you every day have to take a photo, upload it to WordPress, and then write a paragraph in the foreign language. The idea was really good. The intent was really, really good. But, I mean, the logistics just didn't come through and it really pissed off everybody.
Right.
Because it was too pressured to do something every day in a country that didn't have good access to internet, and we didn't have the tools, and some of us didn't have our laptops, so we have to go pay $5 at an internet cafe. So being really intelligent of how you deliver your content is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. It's really fun, but it's got to work too.
Right. That's a great example. Question from the audience. Question is, what is WordPress?
Sorry, yeah. Yeah. WordPress is an online blogging. You're familiar with blogs, correct? It's like an online blogging platform. And what for example, our professors would do would say, hey, send me a post, or he would make us accounts, and so we can write little blogs, little paragraphs. It's like a journal, like an online journal. Thanks.
But that's a really good point. I'm just filling in as the mic gets passed. So we're adopting technologies, but the logistics, can't overlook the logistics. So technology may work at an institution at UT, but when you're trying to port it to study abroad or some other context, it doesn't work. So think through the logistics.
I think following up on what Dan said, I think we're going to be talking, or we have thus far been talking a lot about what are called large OERs. In other words, places where you have lots of undergraduates who will work for less than perhaps they're worth. Graduate students who work for free. I'm guessing most people don't have those luxuries. But there are, in terms of small OERs, there are things like WordPress. There are what are called Web 2.0 tools, which give you a lot of functionality that will allow you to do things by yourself without a large tech component supporting you, which I think is important, because I think one of the big obstacles for people is, how do I do this if I don't have $1 million grant, or I don't have some center standing behind you doing that? So I think for us, I'm going to let Amy talk about the collaboration with Accesso. We've done collaborations with a few other professors on much smaller projects. So Accesso is a full curriculum for second-year Spanish. I think for most people, that's biting off a rather large project all at once. So we've done smaller projects with French and Ukrainian, and we're about to start a new project with Russian. I think for us, the big issue with collaboration is really, ironically, one of control. Is the goal of the developer to do exactly what the professor wants, the perfect implementation of the professor's idea, or is it to shape that idea, to tell the professor, this isn't true in Amy's case, yeah, you know, that's really not a good idea. That's not a good use of the technology. The students won't find that very interesting. That really becomes a thorny issue, because in a sense, even though it is the content of the professor, the developer has his or her name on it as well. And we want to be proud of what we do, and we want it to be a good reflection of our work as well as a good reflection of the teacher's work. And that at times is a bit problematic for us. And I think there is also, between faculty creating work and developers who are doing it, I think the developers would usually like something that is static, pre-prepared. You're going to hand me something that's already done, and I'll organize it and we'll be finished. Whereas the developers are laughing on who are looking here. What faculty normally do is not that, and I wear two hats, since I've taught language and I try to be a developer. For faculty, obviously there are other things they are doing, and there are multiple revisions, and things do change and they evolve. And in many cases, I think you just sort of have to jump in and let the project develop the way the project develops, because what you intend on it being at the beginning is often not what it ends up being at the end. But I would stress again that talking about this, I don't think doing OER means necessarily having the technical staff at Carnegie Mellon or having another unit supporting you, that you can do all of this on the cheap, on the fly. OER is about sharing. It's not necessarily about technology. So I don't think technology should discourage anyone from doing it.
Yeah, amen. So that we were talking yesterday about big OER and little OER and that continuum. So we're really lopsided here on big OER, institutionally based, so forth. So again, Daniel, you've got a heavy load, because you get to talk about your contribution to developing maybe a smaller piece. Brazil Pod is all kinds of OERs that have been pulled together under this one. Yeah. Amy.
Well, I'll go back to the original question and talk about some of the challenges of collaboration, and it would probably be a lot more fair if some of my graduate students were here to talk about it from their perspective too, because I was the one saying, no, this isn't good enough. We need to work on this a little bit more. But Accesso is a ever-evolving collaborative project, so the instructors that are teaching it each semester create common lesson plans for implementing the activities that are available online, and those are available on the instructor side, and we update them if people are interested in using them. And part of their job of creating, each instructor creates 3 days worth of lesson plans from, from hola to the end of class. I mean, exactly what's going to go down in there. And then that's used as a guide. I mean, no one has to follow it as a script, but it's there, which is a nice collaborative thing because not everyone is planning lessons every day. There's a great deal of content in this project, and I mean, not everyone can be an expert on U.S. Latino, then you have to go and be an expert on Spain, then you have to go and be an expert on the Caribbean and Mexico, and that's just one semester. That's daunting, to try to teach this. So the collaborative lesson plans gives you ways of dealing with that and supporting background knowledge that you need to teach it. When they go through and create the lesson plans, they also are responsible for revising the Acceso site itself, the text, the video, if a link is broken for that day of class. Sometimes we have conflicts about approach. We have lots of different varieties of Spanish spoken in our department. So you'll go through and have a peninsular student say, well, this is all wrong, and want to go through and change all of the text that had been originally created by a U.S. Latino student. So we have issues of variety, perspective, people revising other people's work according to their vision, and we have to negotiate that. So that's a collaborative challenge that we face.
Okay, I want to ask, change direction a little bit, and because I sense that maybe some people are, again, I said that this is a group that represents higher education, and I want to make sure that we can bridge all of education, so secondary, even people, I don't know if we have any elementary school teachers here, but OER is supposed to be by nature collaborative. And so let's talk more at the personal level about you as people, not as professors at an institution, but what are you, if you have a collaborative team, a group of people, however big it is, 40 graduate students or maybe a couple of colleagues that you're working on a project with, what are you good at, and what are you not so good at within your collaboration? In other words, I would say that collaboration works when you have a certain complementarity and people realize what they're good at and can lead from their strengths. So talk about it more at a personal level. What do you said, for example, Amy, you got the mic, I'll pitch it to you, that you weren't good at technology. Okay, so or you didn't consider yourself a technological person. So, I mean, you were crazy. You were an assistant professor trying to do something that's interdisciplinary and technological, and you didn't have why? So you had some weaknesses there. You obviously partnered with other people. So let's talk about it from your own personality. How did you get it to work with who you are?
Well, the why was that I wasn't satisfied with what existed for teaching. I didn't think it did a good enough job. And so I'm the coordinator of all of these graduate students who are learning how to be language teachers. And so I think I'm good at inspiring people to try to do their best. I'm bad at letting go of control. So it's been a real lesson for me in my control freak self to really let other people's voices shine through, and that the best way to lead is by inspiring people to contribute and feel ownership themselves and admit when you don't know what you're doing. So it was a lot less scary for the people I was working with to try to create online materials, because all of us were, I mean, we weren't technophobes, but we didn't really understand. So then we all had to learn together from Jonathan's unit about what we're doing, and we've all come a long way with understanding. I mean, I still don't do any of the program. I don't write code. I don't know what that means. I have visions, and then I say, can y'all do this? and then we look for tools, and I've gotten better at looking for tools because I've seen them look for tools. You know, could you use YouTube in this way, in the interactive transcript that exists? Can you do so? You don't have to start out from an expert perspective at all. You all are all experts because you're content developers as teachers. You create materials every day. No one follows it exactly like it is in a book. So it's a way of sharing your ideas of how to make things better, and sharing, I don't know, that is the power, truly, of it, is sharing and having everybody's voice count.
Following Amy, I'll say I don't believe when we took on the unit as the sort of technical arm of it, we really knew what we were doing either. It's probably scary to her in hindsight. I think in terms of education, I mean, I think the goal should always be to be learning something new. So for us, I mean, we had some background in digitizing AV materials because we run a language lab. We had some background in doing web pages, but we had sort of I guess what we were calling yesterday, a cognitive surplus. We had lots of people who were talented, who were interested, including undergraduates who really wanted to do web pages but didn't have any content, or really wanted to do something with video but didn't have any content. So for us, the goal really, and me sort of as the director of the unit, who's sort of a teacher at heart, was to get to teach all of the undergraduates who worked for me and give them a chance to build resume fodder, to give them real, I did this, it's online, here it is. It's not something I did in class, it's real and people are using it. So yeah, I think for Amy sort of as a content developer and us sort of as the technical arm, we just kind of jumped off a cliff together, which I'm not sure with hindsight we should have started a project as big as we did. So again, this is a curriculum for all of second year Spanish. It was the first project we did. And then sort of following up on that, we did much smaller projects. Probably would have made sense to do it the other way around. But I think it builds, and you know, as people learn and as people see what Amy has done and what we have done with Amy, then other instructors look at it and say, hey, you know, I could probably do that on a smaller scale. You know, maybe I don't want to do a whole textbook, but I've seen what you've done, so I have some paper-based materials that I've been working on. Maybe you could put those online for me. Or, you know, I've been watching this video series and it's really cool and I'd like to do something where my students watch the video series. So I think the idea that it has to be perfect, it has to be OLI, it has to be this giant project could easily discourage people. I mean, I think you can start small. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be nearly perfect. In many cases, I think most instructors are sitting on a treasure trove of materials they've worked with for years and years and years, and getting them online using tools that are free or relatively free. You probably have students sitting in your class who really want to do some web page design, and they need you to hand them something because they don't have anything to develop. And you hand them the content and you wish them well and you help them out. In many cases, my job is sort of to be Amy's representative, I think, in many cases. So when they don't understand what the goal is, why are we doing it this way? I can tell them sort of what the pedagogical rationale is for doing it a particular way. But again, I think that the perfect is the enemy of the good. Yeah. As it said, that I think you just jump in and see what happens and you improve. I mean, again, the beauty of it being on the web rather than in print is you can tweak it forever and ever and ever 100 times a day until you get it right.
And there's also the idea of if it's perfect, then you're not leveraging the power of open, in the sense that if you put it on the web and ask people to crowdsource, help you perfect it, you actually promote the collaboration we're talking about. But that's very hard for any developer to let it go, push it out the door when you know there are typos there, and in foreign language materials, mistakes, that's a big deal, right? So we've had that with our own, some of our own projects. Should we get it out to the public and have them vet it and actually ask their help in developing the materials? And that's, otherwise it's like a commercial product, and that's going to spend years and years and years in the editorial process so that it's really, really good. So that's we have that discussion all the time. These are not the same as commercial. We should take advantage of the internet and try to Wikipedia, turn it into this collaborative process. Daniel.
Yeah, and just to add on to what John was saying, I think he's really, I think he really is really in tune with this idea that, you know, that there's content and then there's delivery of that content. And a lot of times we're so focused on just the content that we forget to, you know, actually get it out. So I think that was a really good point. And I think one reason why that happens, and I hate to bring this up, I feel kind of awkward bringing it up being one of the youngest people in this room, is the generational differences between my generation and your generation, even though not everyone's the same age here. But what I'm trying to say is that when we create these things for, in my case, students to use, we have to remember who we're creating them for. Because a lot of times when we create stuff, we're just like, hey, I'm doing it because it's fun, you know, this is cool, I like it. And you got to have that too to make it enjoyable. But I think a lot of times we'll create these things that we think are really cool. And then, you know, we try to push them on our students to use them, and then we're like, this isn't really that cool, you know. So that's something to always take into consideration, knowing your audience. And so going back to the original question of, you know,
pedagogical materials and cool don't usually go together.
Yeah. But this day and age, whole brain thinking, it's got to be cool, you know? It's got to be fun. Sure.
Question, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How much time for preparation, making sure that every single word is correct, because then it brings
Okay, let me paraphrase what you're saying for the online audience. I guess the comment or the question is about user-generated materials. Student-generated materials in a classroom will contain mistakes, and so there's a bit of worry on the part of the questioner. Should you then put those materials online, make them public, even though they contain some kinds of inaccuracies?
I think that to answer your question, I'll go back to the example that I used earlier about making movies in Orlando's class, is that a lot of times I think we feel pressure to put that material out too quickly. And, you know, it's just a little movie, just have fun, do it. But he takes it seriously. And so there's a whole process that he has where it's like, okay, you know, first class is just brainstorming an idea, and then we have to incorporate a bunch of new vocabulary that we've never used before, as well as then we have to submit all of our dialogue to get, you know, checked, and it becomes classwork, you know, like it's like submitting a paper essentially, and then we have to practice it, and then we have to do multiple takes to make sure that we get and pronounce it and everything. So yeah, it's a lot of work, and I think by doing that and him, you know, putting his little annotations on everything really shows, hey, this is real good content. It's professional.
I mean, that's an even bigger question about language itself, and are we going to deal with authentic language, because native speakers can make quote-unquote mistakes, but we're so used to pedagogical materials effacing, getting rid of all of that, what is really naturalistic. That's natural language. So I think it's a bit jarring for teachers sometimes to have materials that contain what is actually authentic language. So they're still getting used to that idea. We, in our French materials, since we filmed a lot of students interacting with French people, they make mistakes. And I think it's one of the things you can do is frame the material so that people who are using your textbook or your materials understand that this was a first take. They're not actors, and therefore people who are in first, second, third year, that's how they talk. That's real. So they're not actors, they're real people. And as long as they understand that, people who are teachers themselves say, yeah, that sounds like my students. That's really how. But one thing to strike a balance, because there is this ongoing debate about, you know, authentic language. we do flag inaccuracies. So if it's a grammatical mistake, we'll flag it and then say, you know, it should have been or whatever. So that way we actually are promoting the idea of using natural language to draw attention to what kinds of mistakes, developmental mistakes, what people had trouble with at different levels. But yeah, that's a huge question and a huge ongoing debate within language teaching. And go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead. You're modeling for the rest of them.
Right,
They have questions too. But yes, we talked. Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. Okay, the comment is about the relationship of the national standards, so the 5 C's, communities and culture and communication and so forth. She seems to think that that is, it's open in itself. I guess the philosophy behind the 5 C's is one of openness. So the question, I guess, is what is the relationship between OER and the 5 C's? Who wants to take that on the panel?
And it's a great question too. I think the standards can be implemented regardless of your format of teaching. But the more open the format, the more chances you have to incorporate the standards into your teaching. So when you think about connections or cultures, if you're tied to a textbook, your ability to make connections to other areas of learning is quite limited. If you use open educational resources, you can connect to almost anything, right? Culture, same thing. How do you bring your language outside the classroom if you're tied to a textbook? It's quite complicated, right? You're always trying to create, and all of you who teach languages know this, we're always trying to come up with contexts that look like real life contexts, but we know that they're not. And the students know that they're not real life contexts. But if you can open your classroom and really connect your students to the outside world, then it becomes a real context. So it helps in that sense.
I was pointing to Amy because that question made me think of Accesso, which is very interdisciplinary. I don't know that if you brand it in terms of the 5 C's, you talk more about the MLA kind of transcultural, translingual, but it still is, you know. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe that doesn't need to go on the feed or for posterity. But yeah, no, I think that it can be framed nice because it can be framed in the context of the 5 C's. It can be framed. I don't know if the idea of multiple literacies has trickled down yet to K-12, but the idea that maybe we've moved too far towards the communicative, the oral, transactional, talking about ourselves a lot and what we do rather than talking a lot about the other cultures. You know, this is sort of a backlash of communicative language teaching, that we aren't concentrating on accuracy enough, that we've gone too far the other way. Well, there's a whole new movement now talking about using literacy. And so it can be discussed in terms of that as well. So I think that all of this really is just different ways of talking about good teaching. And people have their little shticks, and it's, I always say, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, you know, good teaching, following principles of second language acquisition, is good teaching. No matter how you frame it, what theoretical framework you're putting it in.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I want to ask. Anybody you want to talk about your personal life?
Yeah,
okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Chris.
Yes. Yeah. in one thing we shouldn't lose in all this, and I often characterize my own work in this way, is that um, we are talking about collaboration. We're talking about doing something which benefits our students, but somewhere in there, there has to be something that really floats your boat, that really makes you, that you're passionate about, that you know will be personally enriching. And if possible, it of course has to benefit your students in some way if it's going to have, otherwise you just go off and play golf in Hilton Head or something. But I mean, really something that really is going to enrich your life in at least a medium and maybe a long-term way. And when I think about the things that I've done in creating projects and so forth, some of them have literally changed my life in ways that are undeniable. And I think of, at one point, I said I'd started working with digital video and stuff like that, and I talked to some people in Quebec. I'm in French studies, so I'd really developed relationships with people in Quebec. Talked to somebody in the French government, and I said, I really would like to do a multimedia portrait of a city, which is really a foolish idea. But so the guy said, well, why don't you do Sherbrooke, which is a small, well, it's actually mid-sized town in the Western Townships. And he said, I bet you we can find some money for you. So I got a small grant from the Quebec government to go up there. I went up there on my own with a video camera, lights, I went through the Chamber of Commerce and the mayor's office and so forth, and met all kinds of people, had 20 minutes in the mayor's office to set up lights, camera, microphone, interview him, and get out of there. Yeah, I mean, it was a completely silly project. But I then programmed it in Director and put it online, and it was an OER resource. It's still up. It's mostly non-functional now for technical reasons. But my son ended up going to university in Sherbrooke. I've been back there 10 times. He now lives in Montreal. It became a foundation for what is an ongoing relationship with Quebec in all sorts of dimensions, which would have been impossible without that foolishness, that Jonathan was talking about. Well, we didn't really know what was. I had no clue what I was getting into. Well, not no clue, but I was way over my head. But met great people, established a relationship with the whole region, ended up, sharing this with colleagues who did use it while it continued to function. It was in Director and so forth. So, I mean, that whole notion that
This is just a little technical difficulty. Here we go. Back online.
Glitch. But anyway, so that there is the personal, and we shouldn't be intimidated. Take on something that really passionately interests you and follow it through. And then if it's shareable, great.
I have a question for everybody. It's not just the panelists. And this is, we talk a lot about Coral. Our mission is, of course, the mission of all the LRCs is to promote foreign language learning and teaching, and improve foreign language teaching. But we talked then about our particular mission, which is to do that through open education, through open educational practices. And at the center of that, of course, is collaboration. So the question is, how can we promote a culture of collaboration in our institutions? So think of your schools, think of our university, think of your department. What can you do to help your colleagues and yourself be more collaborative? You might think of a couple of the problems that you've had to overcome. Who has any great ideas about the notion of promoting collaboration where you are? Somebody from the audience? Yeah. So one place to start, again, is just simply to start using what we already have online. Could, so there's a comment from the audience about using a site, a teacher's corner that has all kinds of resources. What site is that? Do you know? Okay. American Council of Teachers of Russian has a teacher's corner where people can collaborate. Mhm. Right. Right. So it has all kinds of information, including information about scholarships and travel. Right. So that, just to take a quick poll, how many people in the audience or in the room use a website similar to that to connect with colleagues? That is a professional website where you do something like a teacher's corner, where you're actually talking to colleagues. I see on one hand, I see half hands, hands that are not quite hands. Okay, yeah. Okay, so a mention of AATG listserv, Teachers of German, Flask listserv, carrying on some kind of professional conversation. Rebecca? Okay, this is a comment from the audience that are at her school. There are grants, curriculum development grants, but the trick is that you have to collaborate with a colleague. So it's not just then within the Spanish department, but the idea is that you cross a disciplinary boundary. Okay, and is that what that's here at the Austin School District? It's a private school. Okay, at what level? Okay, so she's talking about K through 12. There are these grants that are available in a private school here in Austin. In the back. Mm-hmm. So the idea from the audience, somebody is sharing that at her school they're talking about creating a blog so that all teachers, I guess everybody in the school, can share ideas about teaching, about classrooms, about methodologies. Yeah. Something. Yeah. They were wondering online, what level is this that you're talking about? It's a charter school, so that it's both middle school and high school. Mm-hmm. George? Mm-hmm. So George Dedivo, you might remember him from yesterday's panel. He says something that seems obvious, but probably is not obvious to everybody, or something that you should be doing that we don't do, is start off the meeting with something that's new that you can share. What I just learned, and then share it with your group. Mm-hmm. I saw a hand over here. Mm-hmm. Right. And again, somebody from the audience is from Baylor. Is taught Baylor University. Is talking about how to have faculty colloquia, where faculty share new ideas, kind of similar to George's idea, but maybe on a more formal scale. And he gives the example of using Google Maps and how you can integrate that in foreign language teaching. Any other ways to promote, maybe from the, it's nice to hear from the audience too, promote the notion of collaboration. Nobody's talking about administrators. That's important to get administrators in. Can we do anything with administrators to help them help us? Mm-hmm. PLC. So yes, so here in Texas, there is a requirement to have a PLC. I've heard that mentioned. Yes. So the audience member is talking about in the state of Texas, well, some school districts, it's actually a requirement to a teacher have a PLC, a professional learning community. So let me throw that back and say what I've heard other people talk about this PLC. How effective is it and what is it? Because it can be all kinds of different things to different people. That is, it would seem on the face of it that would be a good way to start this collaboration. But what is a PLC? Okay, so the other comment from somebody else in the audience is, well, it's a great idea, but it hasn't worked in her experience yet, right? Hasn't worked yet because they're not given enough autonomy to form their own community of practice, that it's still driven by somebody else, so it's not really of your own choosing. So that's true. A community of practice has to be self-organizing. You cannot be forced to join to do certain things. Yeah, that's not going to work for you. Or to develop things that not within the teacher's subject matter, right? Yeah. Okay, so that's a good point. Yeah, George. So George, as president of SoCalt, which is the Southern, SoCalt stands for South Central Association of Language Learning Technology. There are many IALTs, so there are many variants of this. And he gives a shout out for his organization. It's a community, so join that community. It's exactly about this intersection of language and technology, and Coral has been using that community to promote the notion of open education. They're getting tired of us talking about open education, but right? So find, no, I'm just kidding. Find those organizations that are right there, and yeah. What about from the panel? It's nice to hear from the audience. So how about you guys talking about in your own institutions? I know like in universities, people talk about interdisciplinarity and they talk about team teaching and they talk about, but we are stuck in our offices, in our silos, and in our heads. What have you done to overcome at your institution? Or what have you done to promote collaboration?
I really, really like how you said stuck in our heads, because that was kind of what I was going to bring up. I mean, all the stuff that the audience said about going to regional conferences and researching, that stuff is really important. But I kind of want to bring it back to the personal level. I think it's pretty simple. You have to trust, with open educational resources, you have to trust others. And I know that sounds very poetic and everything, but I mean, it's something that we always have to kind of recall and tell ourselves, that kind of take away our own egos. Like, this isn't my thing. This isn't about me. This is about creating something that people are going to use and learn. And so I'll give you an example. Brazil Pod. It used to be just Orlando's collection of awesome programs. And then he really helped me realize that, what's important is teaching people about Brazilian culture and learning Brazilian Portuguese. And so by putting it under the banner of Brazil Pod and starting to collaborate with other professors on the projects that they're doing and just put it all underneath this banner, it really kind of neutralizes it, and it doesn't no longer just become Orlando's awesome programs. But on the same level, going back to the personal thing, you have to have real human contact with people as well. And you can do this over the internet, which seems really hard because you think that you actually have to be in the room and have that face-to-face time, which is awesome if you can afford to do that with time. But something as simple as when you're tweeting, maybe grammar quotes or something else, and someone retweets you, I mean, that's a huge deal because you know somebody was sitting on somewhere across the world, they saw what you thought and thought that was cool, and then they shared it. So you feel that human connection. And so with the stuff that you guys create, and if you really want to promote a population of culture or a culture of collaboration, that you really have to remember to trust others as well as, you know, put that human contact in what you're doing.
That's a great, thanks for sharing that. That's a great concrete example of, yesterday we were talking about OER enablers. So what are the differences between OER and like a commercial product? OER comes with a group of developers who actually want to talk to you. Right. So if you have a textbook, there's an author there, but there's no way for them to communicate with you. But typically the people who create these materials really want to engage with users. So that's one of the affordances of OER. So make sure that as a developer, you follow up on that, and as users, you follow up on that. So engage with the other, yeah.
I love how this guy articulates and summarizes.
That's my job. That's my job.
Better than we do.
I guess within our department, I mean, I coordinate the lower level, you know, the basic language. I like to call it foundational because I don't feel like there's anything basic about what we're doing. There seems to be this breach between the professors that teach the upper level courses, the literature courses, and then the graduate students and some lecturers that teach the language courses. The way that we've tried to get everyone involved.
Really? I've never heard of that before. I was just like, that's surprising to me.
Well,
go ahead. No, I couldn't help myself.
I'm fortunate enough to be from a department that is a particularly congenial spot. We're known at the University of Kansas for actually liking each other and getting along. We've tried to have the other professors be a part of the project by appealing to their expertise in their subject matter. So if a graduate student that's working with a professor read a text in a class, I can give a concrete example. It was a U.S. Latino class, and they read The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. This graduate student decided that she wanted to create an activity for our foundational courses, and she went to the professor to ask for advice. And it was talking about a very complicated, and the student herself is not Latina. It was talking about the point of the activity was to talk about having, moving between identities, being more than one thing. And the professor was able to explain to her, you know, you aren't more of one thing than another thing. You're thinking about this all wrong. You're sort of both things at once. And so it was really instructive for the graduate student for her professional development. It involved the professor in the process. We have professors that let us know about things that they're reading in their field. Like we have an activity that's on the, gosh, I'm drawing a blank. It's FNLZ, in Mexico. What's the, oh, somebody help me. There was the silent march against the violence that originated in Chiapas. That's where I was going, Chiapas. Chiapas. And so the professor that's a Mexicanist let us know that the march was going on, because you can't stay on top of everything. So then we were able to update our page and have that day's class. We updated that activity, say, hey, this march is going on next weekend. And then there's a silent march from Chiapas to La DF. And this is going on now. And that's how, you know, the professors are contributing to the project as well. So I don't know if you could, deferring to people's area of expertise, recognizing them as an expert.
Stroking egos.
Yeah, okay, that's another way of going to say,
Right.
tends to encourage, in our case, it's encouraged collaboration.
Yeah. I want to answer my own question and say that one place to start, I think, is with like-minded individuals. So if we're talking about building collaborative teams, that the person who you think would be your natural ally may not be your natural ally. The person who teaches the same subject matter as you may not connect with that person, also known as your colleague. But that's okay, because there may be somebody outside of your department or outside of your particular field. In other words, the frame of open education is bigger than foreign languages, so there are other, we keep coming back to this. You really do need a group of like-minded individuals who share, we use the word standard, who share a way of thinking about things. And those people exist. You may have to go outside the natural category that's been given to you, your department or your subject matter. So yeah, there are people out there, but you've got to form your team.
And to follow up on that, that's why I think it's very important to make sure that everybody knows what you're interested in and what you want to do and what your project is. Everybody needs to know. So if you, like George said, if you attend a professional conference, make sure that you go back to your school and you talk to your administrators and say, this is what's going on. And I would love to be able to give a presentation to anyone who's interested about what I learned at the conference, right? So, and that's the way to find out who may be a like-minded person and who may be an ally, because otherwise, you may be working with people who would love to be working on the same kinds of things that you're interested in, but they don't know. They have no idea that you're interested in that. Right?
Yeah, get the word out. We're going to continue this conversation, but I want to, I see that we're running out of time, and we have a break until 10:30. You guys on the internet have been very quiet this session, so next session we hope that you'll wake up. Is there a question? Oh, there's a there's an ongoing conversation. It's been very active. Excuse me, I misspoke. But there are no questions for the panelists. Okay. So I want us to take a 10-minute break. We'll resume at 10:30, and our next topic will then be about foreign language. I can't read it from this. Here we go. Oh yes, foreign language, the language educator and professional development. And yeah, this is, as I kept saying, this is our grand finale. So we've been building up to this because this will be how to become an open educator and how to join our own community that we're trying to build right now. So don't go away. 10-minute break.